They say the moments that ruin you rarely arrive with noise. They come softly, almost politely, slipping into your life disguised as comfort. And by the time you realize what they are, it's already too late to undo them. And it has been 2 years since the night a simple question from someone I trusted turned my careful, fragile world inside out. 2 years since a family friend, someone I had known since he was a teenager, tagging along behind my husband at summer barbecues, looked at me with eyes that no longer boyish and asked, "If I told you what I really wanted, would you say yes?" And even now, I still hear it, clear and steady, not desperate, not manipulative, just honest in a way that made my heart tremble. And I often ask myself how something so quiet could unravel a life that looked so intact from the outside. Because from the outside, I had everything: a husband, a beautiful home, dinner parties with laughter that echoed just convincingly enough to fool the neighbors. But loneliness doesn't announce itself with slammed doors or dramatic fights. It seeps in slowly, like water through unseen cracks. It looks like sitting across from your husband at dinner while he scrolls through emails, nodding absently at stories you stopped telling halfway through because you can see he isn't really listening. It sounds like silence stretching across the bed at night. Heavy and unspoken, it feels like becoming invisible in your own marriage, and Daniel and I hadn't always been this way. There was a time when his hand would automatically find the small of my back in crowded rooms, when a single glance across the table could warm me for hours, when we talked about dreams instead of schedules. But somewhere between promotions, late-night conference calls, missed anniversaries disguised as unavoidable obligations, and the quiet pride of maintaining a perfect home, we lost the softness we once shared. And I became efficient, polished, reliable, the woman who remembered birthdays and bought fresh flowers every Friday, while he became distant, accomplished, perpetually distracted. And into that carefully ordered, emotionally starved life walked Adrien Daniel as longtime mentee, and our family friend, no longer the awkward college kid who used to spill drinks at our gatherings, but a grown man in his mid-20s with steady eyes and a thoughtful quietness that made you feel as though he truly saw what others overlooked. And he began coming by more often, sometimes to discuss business ideas with Daniel, sometimes just to drop off documents or return borrowed books. And at first, there was nothing unusual about it. I would offer coffee, we would exchange polite conversation, and I would retreat to the kitchen or my reading nook. But gradually those brief exchanges lingered, stretching a few minutes longer each time. And I noticed the way he asked about my day with genuine curiosity, not as a formality, but as if the answer mattered. And I realized how long it had been since anyone had asked me anything without glancing at their phone mid-sentence. And one evening, while Daniel was working late yet again, Adrien arrived to drop off a folder and stayed to help me carry in groceries from the car when he saw me struggling with too many bags, and the gesture was simple, ordinary even. But the way he thanked me for always making the house feel warm and welcoming struck something deep inside me, because Daniel hadn't used words like warm or welcoming in years. and I laughed it off, brushing away the compliment. Yet later that night, I found myself replaying it, wondering why it had meant so much. And that was when I first sensed the shift, subtle and dangerous. Not in his behavior, but in my own awareness, because I began noticing the way the air felt different when he entered a room. The way my posture straightened unconsciously. The way conversations with him left me feeling lighter, as though someone had quietly dusted off the parts of me that had been collecting neglect. And I told myself it was harmless. That admiration is natural, that being seen doesn't have to lead anywhere. But slow burn tension is deceptive. It grows in glances that last half a second too long, in shared jokes that carry a warmth you pretend not to recognize. In moments where silence feels charged rather than empty. And one rainy Saturday, Daniel locked himself in his study for hours, claiming deadlines, while I moved through the kitchen preparing dinner simply to fill the time, and Adrien stopped by unexpectedly drenched from the storm, hair damp and eyes bright, apologizing for not calling first, and I handed him a towel telling him to wait until the rain eased, and we stood there in the soft hum of the oven and the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows, talking about nothing important: books, travel, the strange loneliness of adulthood, yet everything felt significant. And when his fingers brushed mine as he passed me a dish, the contact was brief but electric, a reminder that I was still capable of feeling something immediate and alive. And I should have stepped back, should have drawn a boundary then. But hunger makes even crumbs feel like a feast, and I had been starving for years without admitting it. And then came the question. Not that night, but weeks later, after a series of small moments that quietly rewrote the space between us. After movie nights where Daniel excused himself early and Adrien stayed to help me clean up. After conversations that drifted from casual to confessional, after I found myself dressing with a flicker of awareness on days I knew he might stop by, and it happened during another storm. Thunder rolling across the sky while Daniel was away on a last-minute trip, and Adrien had come over to deliver paperwork, but lingered concern etched across his face when he noticed how tired I looked. And we talked in the living room with only a lamp casting soft light between us, and he said, almost hesitantly, that he sometimes wondered if I was happy, and no one had asked me that in so long that the question alone made my throat tighten, and I tried to deflect. But he held my gaze and said quietly, "If I told you what I really wanted, would you say yes?" And the room seemed to shrink around us, the storm outside fading into a distant murmur as my heart pounded loud enough to drown out reason. And I knew what he meant, even though he hadn't said it outright. Knew that it wasn't just desire, but a longing for connection, for acknowledgement, for something real. And every vow I had ever made flashed through my mind, alongside every lonely dinner, every untouched hand, every night lying awake beside a man who no longer reached for me. And I should have said no, should have ended it there with firm clarity, but instead I whispered yes, fragile and trembling, not because I wanted to destroy my marriage, but because for the first time in years someone had chosen me deliberately. And that single word changed the temperature of the room of my life, and what followed wasn't reckless passion, but something slower, more dangerous. Confession of feelings, a tentative step closer, a kiss that began as hesitation and deepened into inevitability. And even as it happened, I felt the fault lines forming beneath my carefully constructed world. Yet I didn't pull away, because in that heartbeat I felt alive, visible, wanted, and the morning after carried a silence heavier than any storm, sunlight exposing what darkness had allowed. And Adrien left early with a murmured promise to talk later, and I stood alone in my immaculate kitchen, feeling as though every polished surface reflected a version of me I barely recognized, and guilt settled in my chest like a stone, not loud but constant. And when Daniel returned that evening, he studied me with an unfamiliar intensity, as if sensing a shift he couldn't name. And I realized that betrayal isn't just about the act itself, but about the fracture it creates inside you, the way you begin to measure every word, every glance. And Adrien grew distant in the weeks that followed, polite and restrained, as though trying to protect us both from the consequences of that single yes. And I oscillated between longing and regret, wondering if I had comforted my own emptiness or simply deepened it, questioning whether I had sought love or merely validation. And 2 years later, I still replay that night, still feel the echo of his question in quiet moments, still wonder how easily lines blur when you are starved for connection. Because the truth is, I wasn't searching for an affair. I was searching for proof that I still mattered. And sometimes the most dangerous storms are not the ones that rattle windows, but the ones that rise silently inside you, building with every overlooked touch and unspoken word, until a single yes becomes the crack that lets everything break. And I carry that knowledge with me now, a reminder that longing doesn't justify crossing lines. That being seen is powerful, but not always safe, and that some choices don't explode your life instantly, but alter it slowly, reshaping how you see yourself long after the rain has stopped.